mean, the Gra is this wall that circumnavigate Rome for 67 kilometers. And in my location, scouting location, at the beginning, I realized there were like 67 kilometers of possible stories, potential stories. And I also discovered that 3 million people right now live around this strip of route, around Rome. So in a way, this became with the years, the Gra was built in the 60s, and through the years became somehow the new Rome. Because 3 million people live around this route, and so it was very difficult somehow to start facing this world. You know, it's like it was overwhelming, the whole thing. So the first work that I had to do was like creating an emptiness around all this, and then fulfill it with stories. And I wanted the story to be very small stories. I wanted to get rid of all the social impact about the drama also of that place. So in a way to transform this place in something else. For me it became like a space of the mind. And the idea was like to opening up this circle and make it like an infinite line and create this hypothetical space which belonged more to the mind than to the reality. But always working with real stories and real characters. So then through the years I met these 5, 6 characters that became really part of the story. And I just focused on these few stories and got rid of everything else. And then at the end the film wanted to become a transformation of a place, a Rome that we never saw, but also the Roman people themselves. It's a Rome that they never encountered.
Did you start filming immediately, or first you find your, we can say, characters, you know, or it was from the beginning you worked in progress with the camera, or you were before kind of time to discover all these people that you filmed afterwards?
No, I spent like at least 8 months without filming anything, just like going around the place and trying to find out the possible structure of the story and somehow getting to know the people that I met, because only when I had a very strong relationship with each of them, I was able then to figure out which was the fragment of story I wanted. From the beginning I wanted to make a film without a typical narration, without a beginning, a middle and an end. And also in the story I wanted to be like small fragments of the reality. Like Calvino used to say that the truth of something, or something that really captures our attention is that moment when we see it, we turn, and it already disappears. So I had always in my mind the idea of capturing really a little fragment of that moment, but then that fragment had to be like a compression of many moments that they lived together with the characters and with the people. So, for example, the story of the palmologist of the palm, I spent with him more than 2 years, and I was never able to capture the essence of his stories and of his very complex character. I think all of the characters in the film are very complex. And then to be able to capture this little fragment was always a lot of work of spending time together. And then there was a moment which somehow I thought, okay, this is the right moment to film. And that moment I took out the camera and filmed it, but it was always with a lot of work that happened before. And with the palmologist, I spent 2 years with him. That was becoming for me a place where I almost was going to charge myself and to get inspiration and to try to find some stories of him. And for 2 years I was not able to film him. And then suddenly one day he called me in the morning telling me about this invasion of red weevil that he had in his own yard that he built, almost an oasis. And I spent the whole day with him, and I was not able to film, and I was almost feeling embarrassed to penetrate the pain of someone, because for him it was really a shock what happened. And the day was passing by, and at a certain point I went on my own to see these palms that he already cut it out, and I put inside a microphone of my small microphone. I really put in this hole, and I discovered this incredible sound from there. And I called him and I said, "Did you hear what happens there? So vivid. There's a world inside there." And I gave him my headphones, and he started listening. And that's when I start filming. When he does all these faces, I start filming him. And then I moved away from him. And he started facing the palm and started talking basically to the palm. So the whole thing took place in 45 minutes probably. And that I understood that was his story. And that's it. I didn't have to shoot anything anymore. Then I gave him the sound, and he went into his computer and he started elaborating all this possible attempt to how did you destroy this. And then I filmed the night with him, the phone call he did, and then the next day, just a little bit when he was searching again for the pump. So the whole thing, it happened really in 2 days and very few hours of shooting. But to arrive to that, it was a huge work, you know, that took me. And somehow it was like this with all the characters of the film. And I say characters, which is a word that I would like to use in characters, because for me, first they're person, there's a very strong relationship with each of them. And then, as he said, we become character after when there is a movie that is done, you know? Because, so the character is just a fragment of a person that I built a very strong relationship. But this, I think, happened with all my films. It's like I have to have this very, very strong encounter and relationship in order to know where I put the camera. Once I have that, I don't even think anymore about photography or pictures or things, then everything comes very, very natural, and it's like very immediate. It's almost a state of mind that you go into it, things happen magically, you know?
I think that what is really, you know, particular in your work, that you more or less you try like writing the script during years through your, you know, people who want to make them characters, and at the point you say, okay, now I'm ready to shoot. It's almost like in the fiction film, you know, it's different, but usually the other documents that they have hours of filming without any point of view, and at the end they find it, but on editing. I think you work completely different from you work first, and when you know exactly what, or you feel that you find something you should. It's like that.
Yeah, I always say that I write my script, my film throughout the filming. I write them on the camera. Sometimes I get so obsessed with this that I start editing the camera. So if I have a very good story or good moment, then I have to wait for the next moment that will go close to that moment. And if there's something in the middle that I don't like, I erase it from the camera, because it's like a wrong energy that the camera is holding there. So it's like when you write on the paper and then there's something wrong, you just take off the paper and you start writing again from scratch. And I do that very often in the camera, to have like almost an edited process in the camera. Then of course, during the editing period, all this has to bring it into a structure. And I think there are like 3 major words that I had always in my mind during the making of this film. And it's like subtraction, transformation, and structure. Subtraction was like a work of taking out, always. So the big challenge in this film was like to say as less as possible about a place, about the person. So I didn't want to have any background story of them. So you have to just have this immediate encounter with the story without knowing what was before and what's going to be after. So that was a work of subtraction. The door had to be closed instead of to be open into reality. And then transformation, which was like to transform something always in something else, to elevate that moment of reality into a structure, a dramatic structure, into a dramaturgy itself. So always with an idea of this beginning, middle, end, but of a very, very small moment. And then structure, it was in the editing. This was a film that I took a long time of editing, probably from November till, I remember when you came on the first attempt of editing. We started to edit in October and we finished editing basically a week or 2 weeks before Venice Film Festival. So it was really a long process of editing, because the combination, when I said I want to make a film that had a beginning, middle, and end, or that had a structure of the story, you could go in so many different directions. And every time we had to start from scratch, we had to start from scratch. And I say it's almost like the Rubik cube. They have 1,000 possible combinations, but then there's only one combination that puts you to have the six faces the same color. And once that happened, you know that the film has its own life. You know, you don't ask any more questions. So things that are outside that you thought they were so important to bring into the movie, sadly they don't have a space anymore. And the film starts talking to you. In every scene, it gets its own moment. And at the end, it seems so easy. Say, why you didn't do that from the beginning? But it was like 7 months of work to arrive to have this element of floating. Is like almost a composition. And you have to find a note which continues in the next note, and then the space in between, which is the silence, it has to contain so much information also. So it was somehow to find almost like writing a symphony, you know, and once you find them, the whole notes with the character, they have their own life, but that life has to continue always in the next story. So the idea was like cutting a story and not having missing that story, because for example, the character of the actor, it's an enormous, I love him a lot, he was very special, but then at a certain point there was no space for him anymore in the film. So we have to forget him, but how do you put the audience or whoever is watching the film not missing him in the film? So you have, the next scene has to be so strong that you don't remember anymore what happened before. So every time you leave something, you should continue the story, somehow leave that sound, that space into the next story. And so that was the hard part of the editing, I think, you know.
One thing, the film is a huge success in Italy, and what is strange, because usually now the audience wants to know everything about the characters, everything explained, you know, like in television, like it's, you know, Big Brother things, you know, and your film is exactly the contrary. You keep, you know, secret about, you know, like you say, you subtract, you know, and that it's something new that a film like that can in a way, you know, make such a huge success. I think that is something, a new hope that the public is starting to be you know, already, you know, tired of all these films that explain everything and character. They don't need to imagine or think anything. You know. In your films, I think the audience, they have to participate anyway during the structure. Yes.
Yeah. I always say that I ask a lot of effort from the audience because I like to create a space of interpretation, and I'm sure like if there are like 50 people watching the film, 50 people are relating in a completely different way, and that's what somehow the challenge of this film was. Then I know that this has to do also with a cultural thing. But in Italy, it's true, it was a huge success, the film, but also I think the language helped a lot on that, because also in the language there's a huge space of interpretation in the tone, in the word they use it. It's very, very sophisticated and special. The way all these characters talk, you know, it's a very, very, very precise element of narration also, which unfortunately I think includes a lot when someone doesn't speak Italian now. And also I noticed that in America, for example, the film didn't have a single screening. Zero. Completely banned from it. But this happened with all my film there. From Below Sea Level, Sicario, and this film is completely effaced. So I think Americans, they still have, especially in documentary, an idea of a Hegel structure, you know, thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. The good bad guy, the bad guy. I always say that the film are also structured with the explaining and complaining. There's someone complaining and someone explaining why the guy is complaining. You know, that's the structure of the film. You know, it's like Michael Moore syndrome. You know, the good and the bad, they are good and this and that. So unfortunately, documentary there, like in the last 20 years, it's been completely destroyed of the role of being considered as an art, a form of art. It's mostly information. And so that side of the world is totally banned. So going east, the films start growing. I was in this screening in Korea, and it was full of people, and it was a 1.5 hour Q&A. It was almost like a master class. And I had incredible questions for the audience. It was like talking about religion, nature, things. So somehow that culture that is more open to an interpretation of, and more patient probably also to accept that there is a space of interpretation. We have here in the audience, and I'm very, very moved that Mr. De Lillo is in this. I remember when I was reading his book, I read the first chapter, the first page, the first 3-4 times, and every time I was reading something else within the lines, you know. And for me, that's what it is. It's always like try to interpret and try to find something within the lines, which every time takes you somewhere else. That's for me what fascinates me in the writing, in the movies, and in art, basically.
Well, we have another film of Gianfranco just after, but if you have any question, just to any comment, any question. If it can be in português, I will translate, no problem. Podem fazer em português, se quiserem alguma pergunta, alguma coisa, eu traduzo sem problema. Okay.
I'd like to know, you already talked about it a little bit, about, I'd like to know a little bit more about the idea, how the idea of the film changed for you in the editing table. When you started, it was, how did it change? It was very different.
The idea never changed. The basic idea, the feeling. It was difficult then to relate what you see to what you feel. You know, to find this correspondence between an internal element which is extremely emotional to what you see, and then you have to start like tuning yourself into the film, and the film talks to you constantly, and so you have to somehow represent yourself. So it's not that the idea changed. That's why for me that rubric things is an example, because the idea is like to find the whole things of the same color, and you know that, but then how you arrive to that. So the difficult part was not about the structure or about the idea, it was to find that element, that everything then somehow goes on into places. Somehow it's a combination that you keep trying, and then it's really an emotional, it's never a rational thing for me, that, you know, it's really an emotional thing, and that when that emotion is there, I remember when I was editing the film at the beginning, a producer from France, his name is Serge Laloux, and he's been supporting a lot of my work. The first editing we did, he came to see it, and he completely killed it. He said, Gianfranco, I don't see you there, you know, I don't know how, I don't know what, but this is not you. You're not talking to me, I don't see you in this movie. And I knew he was right, but I didn't know how. You know, and then he wrote me this beautiful email, and he gave me a lot of input in the film. And he said, he was just coming from a film, and he just made a movie where the director was like talking from the beginning to the end and explaining things. So I said, I know he doesn't want that, but what is he asking me to do? I knew what he wanted for me and what he was suggesting, but I never knew how to capture that. And that was like an attempting. It's probably when someone is writing a song, or something that it works or doesn't work. Sometimes it works immediately, or like a poetry. You know, they're like poets that they work for like 3 years in 4 lines, and then suddenly that line has its own space. So, as I said, the idea never changed. It changed the mood, and it changed the interaction with the material. And that was I remember with my editor, we had a lot of crises, because for him, sometimes he said, the film is ready, and I said, no, it's not ready. Why is it not ready? He said, I don't know, but it's not ready, so we have to try it again. And then I had someone else that came for 10 days, completely different point of view, and that helped me a lot to find somehow to free a bit the structure, the work that we were doing with the editor. And then the editor came back to the film. The film very much changed, and then we were able again to work together on this. So somehow I needed to step out with someone else and to find something new. And then the editor came back again, and then we were able to finalize and to find the right rhythm on the film. Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm from Rome, and I would like to thank you such a poetic way. I really loved it.
I always say it was not poetic, my point. I think what is in common about the character is that they all have a very, very strong poetic dimension themselves. They are exactly the way you see them. So I was able to capture their poetical sense, because that's what made me engage with all these characters that I filmed. They had an incredible, strong identity in a place where it lacked complete identity, and things in a very strong poetic dimension. So I say it's not my point of view; it's their things that I was able just to listen to them and capture that.
So poetic and so true. I have a very, very basic question. Why Sacro?
Well, this is a Sacro. I inherited this title from the guy that wanted to make the idea for the film, and he's an urbanist, and he wanted to make a film about this side of Rome that very few people know. The last time that place was filmed was in the 50s in Roma of Fellini, which is a marvelous scene shot in the ground when they were building the ground, the Grande Raccordo Anulare. And so Sacro Gra, I understood that later. For me, it was a working title at the beginning, which is playing a bit with the thing Holy Grail, Sacro Graal, so the search of something. But then at a certain point I wanted to get rid of this title in the middle of the process of editing, and I did it for a while. For a while I was working the film with no title whatsoever, and I was like, I said I got rid of the title. And then at the end, when the film was finished, I think that I reacquired again the title, because the word sacred, I feel it in a secular way, it's representing a mystery. So it's the mystery of a place. And the sacrality has a sense of mystery in that sense. So I still think that the film was holding that element of mystery. And for me, it still is a mysterious place, the ground, because it's a place that doesn't articulate, doesn't have to exchange any information with Rome the way we know Rome. There is another film this year made in Rome, which is La Grande Bellezza of Tarantino, and often the two films are always compared. They're really two opposite films with the same force. I always say one is a forza centrifuga and forza centripeta. So one goes to the outside and one goes to the inside. And someone recently wrote an article about the two films together, which I think was very clever. He said one is a Rome. There are ships with no shepherd on that line of Rome, and within Rome there are shepherds with no ships, which somehow is a huge evocation of what's going on in that part of Italy right now. And you can interpret this, that what is shocking for me is really to know that the new Rome is there. It's like 3 million people live around, but that's a Rome that nobody look at, It's like something's completely forgotten. It's the marginality which was built to be marginal forever. And wall, it's like a wall. It's like a new wall around Rome. A wall never worked. In the ancient time, they were not working. They were destroyed in the 18th century, the 800th century they were destroyed the wall around the city because they were avoiding the growing up of the city. And this place has been built in the 50s, and it doesn't allow Rome to grow as a city, as a city of the future. And this is a big problem of that city. But all this I wanted to appear in a very, very, very slight way. I never wanted to make a statement on this. But I think at the end, all this material comes out in the film in a very subtle way. And somehow I wanted this to be also a positive film about Italy. We've been like complaining constantly about the thing, but I wanted to make a film which somehow had a positive element. And I think it's a film based on a loving relationship, with all the characters and all the stories that are there.